Prologue. The price of salvation. The pen felt heavier than it should have. Maybe because it wasn't just ink about to spill onto paper, but my life. My name, my freedom, my future. Signing itself away under the soft glow of an antique lamp. The lawyer's office smelled of leather, dust, and power. That distinct mix that only exists in rooms where decisions ruin people quietly. "Miss Hartley, if you'll initial here," said Mr. Bellamy, the family attorney whose voice could have lulled anyone into compliance. His gray eyes flicked up from behind rimless glasses. And again at the bottom. He hesitated. The contract's pages rustled faintly in the hush, the faintest whisper of consequence. A marriage agreement. Duration. Indefinite. Dissolution. Subject to mutual consent and financial penalty. On another day, in another life, I might have laughed at the absurdity of it. But there was nothing funny about watching your father fall apart. He sat beside me, shoulders slumped, fingers twisting the brim of his hat like a penitent man before confession. His once sharp suit hung loose, as though the debt had already begun to consume him cell by cell. "Olivia," he murmured, "you don't have to do this." The lie was kind. And useless. Because the men he owed money to didn't send letters. They sent warnings. One had already been nailed to our door last week in the form of our dog, lifeless on the porch. The next would be him. Unless I signed. I forced a steady breath, the kind I used to take before exams, before job interviews, before stepping into any room that might decide my fate. "It's just business," I whispered. "Right." Mr. Bellamy gave a polished smile. "Of course. A mutually beneficial arrangement." He slid the pen across the desk. The gold nib gleamed like a blade. My reflection trembled in the polished surface of the mahogany table. A woman with tired eyes, ink-black hair escaping its twist, pale knuckles around a pen that could end everything or save it. My father's voice cracked. "Livy, please." But it was too late. "Sign. Olivia Margaret Hartley." The signature bled slightly through the page, dark and final. A strange stillness followed. The quiet after an execution, when the world realizes the deed is done and nothing can unmake it. "Congratulations," Mr. Bellamy said with practiced brightness, gathering the papers. "You're now engaged to Mr. Dante Blackwell. The ceremony is scheduled for Saturday. Small private. His driver will collect you at 10. Saturday. 3 days. I nodded numb. "Will he be there?" "At the wedding, of course." The lawyer's lips twitched. "Tonight, however, he requests your company for dinner at his residence. He thought it appropriate that you meet properly." Appropriate. The word felt obscene. My father stood abruptly, scraping the chair back. "This is madness. He should be here now, he should." "Mr. Blackwell is an extremely busy man," the lawyer interrupted, his tone soft but unyielding. "And he's already settled your debts, sir." "Entirely." My father froze. "He what?" "A wire transfer this morning." Bellamy folded the contract neatly into a leather folio. "You and your gallery are free of obligation. Your daughter's commitment ensures continued goodwill." He didn't say ownership, but the word hung there anyway. Outside, the afternoon sunlight was too bright, too sharp. I blinked against it, my father silent beside me. People hurried down the street, ordinary and free, unaware that a few blocks away a woman had just sold her future for her father's peace. The car came for me at 6. Black, sleek, silent, like something that didn't belong to the real world. The driver introduced himself only as Marcus, and spoke no more than necessary. The city slid past in glass reflections. Neon signs, dripping rain, 1,000 lives moving forward while mine held its breath. When we turned off the main road, the streets grew quieter, wider. Mansions appeared like ghosts behind wrought-iron gates. Finally, the car glided to a stop before a modern cliffside estate of glass and steel, elegant, intimidating, sterile. For a long moment I couldn't move. Then Marcus opened my door. "Mr. Blackwell is expecting you," he said, tone devoid of warmth. The entrance hall was cathedral high and cold enough to make me shiver. Polished marble reflected the evening lights in clean, ruthless lines. Somewhere beyond the silence, ocean waves struck the rocks below, a dull, rhythmic heartbeat under glass. Then he appeared. Dante Blackwell descended the floating staircase like a verdict in motion. Tall, tailored, impossibly composed. Black hair swept back, eyes like onyx cut from shadow itself. Even dressed simply. Dark slacks, white shirt with sleeves rolled. The air shifted around him, charged, alert. "Miss Hartley," he said. His voice was low, measured, faintly accented. The kind that could order men or ruin women. "I trust the paperwork went smoothly. You might have signed it yourself," I managed. "It was your marriage too." A flicker of something, amusement perhaps, ghosted across his face. "If you'd refused, would my presence have changed your mind?" "Maybe." "No," he said, certain. "You'd have done it anyway. For him." The him hung between us like a confession neither of us wanted to own. "Why me?" I asked. "You could have chosen anyone." "I didn't choose," he replied simply. "I calculated. You were the solution that fit." Chill ran through me. "I see. So I'm an equation now." "You're a partnership," he corrected. "Your father's debts erased. My business legitimized by marriage. You gain security. I gain stability. And what do we lose?" He studied me for a long moment. "Whatever illusions we still have about love." Dinner was served in a dining room made entirely of glass, overlooking the restless sea. A storm gathered on the horizon, violet light flashing far out over the waves. A metaphor so obvious it almost made me laugh. He poured the wine himself, something red and old. I didn't touch it. "You're quiet," he said. "What would you like me to say?" "That I'm thrilled to be bought like a piece of property." His lips curved, not quite a smile. "Honesty. But I value that. I don't think honesty is what this arrangement is built on." "No," he agreed. "It's built on necessity. Honesty is just a luxury we can afford in private." He ate with precise, unhurried movements, as if this were any other evening. I couldn't swallow a single bite. Finally I said, "You don't believe in love, do you?" He looked up, and for a heartbeat something raw flashed through the darkness of his eyes. Then it was gone. "I believed once," he said softly. "It got someone killed." Silence. Only the rain beginning to tap the glass. I wanted to ask, who, how, why, but something in his posture warned me off. Instead I said, "Then why marry at all?" "Because emotion complicates business. A wife simplifies it." He met my gaze evenly. "You'll find the arrangement tolerable, I think. You'll have your own space, your own interests. You'll be safe." "Safe?" I almost laughed. "From what?" "From the people who collect debts with knives instead of invoices." His expression didn't change. "They won't touch you while you're mine." The possessive pronoun hit like a shiver, half terror, half something I refused to name. When Marcus drove me home later, the storm had broken fully. Lightning veined the sky. Thunder rolled like the voice of some old god passing judgment. I pressed my forehead against the window, watching water blur the world outside. My reflection stared back, hollow-eyed, a ring of shadow under one lid where exhaustion had settled. In 3 days, I would stand beside a man who didn't believe in love and promise him fidelity I didn't owe. In 3 days my father's safety would be purchased, my autonomy gone. And yet, deep inside that cold knot of fear, something else coiled, a strange, dangerous curiosity. Because when Dante Blackwell looked at me, there had been a flicker of something behind the iron restraint. Pain maybe. Or longing. Or the ghost of the man he used to be before love turned to ruin. I should have hated him. I wanted to. Instead, all I could think of was the way he'd said safe, like a promise he fully intended to keep, no matter the cost. That night I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw signatures bleeding across paper, a pen glinting like a weapon. Outside, thunder echoed through the city, and I wondered if somewhere, He was awake too, pacing his glass palace by the sea, counting the hours until the cage door closed for both of us. 2:30 in the morning I went to the window. The storm had cleared. The city lights shimmered off wet streets like melted stars. For a moment, the world looked almost forgiving. I whispered into the glass, "You did the right thing." But even my reflection didn't believe it. Somewhere out there, Dante Blackwell was preparing for a wedding that neither of us wanted and both of us needed. I imagined him reading the contract again, ensuring every clause was airtight, every escape route sealed. And maybe, just maybe, wondering if the woman who had signed her name beside his could ever become more than collateral. The morning mail arrived with a single black box tied in silver ribbon. No note. Inside lay an emerald ring surrounded by diamonds, old and heavy, clearly antique. The stone burned deep green under the light, like forest shadows in flame. I slipped it onto my finger, and the weight of it pressed against my pulse like a verdict. 3 days. In 3 days, I would marry the man who'd bought my future. In 3 days my father would be safe. And in 3 days, I would begin the slow, beautiful ruin of both our hearts. That night, as the city slept, I dreamed of glass shattering, and of blood washing away in the rain. He offered her freedom. She didn't realize it would cost her soul. Chapter 1. The House of Glass. The morning of my wedding dawned far too calmly for what it was meant to destroy. Sunlight slipped through the curtains like a trespasser, soft and gold, pretending everything was ordinary. Birds sang outside my window, oblivious. Somewhere downstairs, the old coffee machine sputtered to life, loyal even after years of neglect. If anyone had glanced through the open window, they might have mistaken the moment for peace. But peace has a sound, gentle, unbroken. This was silence. The kind that comes before a storm or a confession. I lay there listening to the heartbeat in my ears, counting the seconds. In a few hours I would no longer be Olivia Hartley. In a few hours my name, my choices, my very skin would belong to Dante Blackwell. The thought tasted like metal. My phone buzzed against the nightstand. A text from an unknown number. Car will arrive at 9:45. Bring only personal items. Everything else has been arranged. D. So polite. So efficient. So utterly inhuman. I stared at the message until the words blurred, then set the phone down face first. It was easier not to look at it. Easier not to think about what everything else meant. My clothes, my new identity, the invisible cage being prepared for me behind glass walls and ocean views. I sat up slowly, the sheets cool against my skin, and caught sight of the emerald ring glinting on my finger. It caught the morning light and fractured it into 1,000 tiny shards across the walls. Beautiful. Unforgiving. Just like the man who had given it to me. Downstairs, my father was pacing the kitchen tiles. The smell of burnt toast hung in the air, a smell that used to mean late art show mornings and laughter, not dread. He looked up when he saw me. "You don't have to do this," he said again, as if repetition could turn hope into fact. "I already did," I answered softly. 3 days ago. With a pen. He winced, running a hand through his graying hair. "I'll find another way, Livy. I swear I will. I can sell the gallery, the house. They don't want money, Dad. They want ownership. Blackwell's the only one who offered something else." My voice cracked on the last word, and I hated it for betraying me. He crossed the room and pulled me into a hug. His shirt smelled faintly of turpentine and old books, the scent of home. For a heartbeat I was a child again, safe and certain that my father could fix anything. Then his shoulders shook. "I'm so sorry," he whispered into my hair. "For every bad decision that brought us here." "It's okay." It wasn't. But forgiveness was easier than truth. When he pulled away, his eyes were bright. "At least promise me one thing. Promise you'll look for a way out." I managed a smile. "You raised me, remember? I always look for exits." He tried to laugh, but it sounded like a sob in disguise. The dress hung waiting on my closet door. Ivory silk, delicate lace sleeves, understated elegance. Something out of a dream I'd never had. I'd expected Dante to send something cold and severe, but this was almost kind, which made it worse. Kindness from a man like him could only be strategic. I dressed alone, the quiet punctuated by the faint hum of the city waking outside. The mirror reflected a stranger. Calm, poised, eyes too still. People always say brides glow. I didn't. I shimmered like frost. At 9:45 on the dot, a black Mercedes pulled up in front of the house. Marcus, the driver from that first night, stood beside it in a pressed suit and dark glasses. Precise. Unsmiling. My father followed me to the door. "You can still change your mind." "No," I said, stepping into the sunlight. "It's already changed me." His hand caught mine. "Be happy, Livy." The words hit harder than they should have. Happiness. Such a fragile, impossible wish. "I'll try," I lied. The city blurred by in streaks of gray and green as we drove. Marcus didn't speak, and I didn't ask him to. I spent the drive memorizing the streets I might never see again, the cafes where I'd wasted hours reading, the art supply store with a cracked blue awning, the park bench where my father and I used to eat gelato every Friday night. The familiar gave way to the foreign. Skyscrapers softened into mansions, brick into marble, noise into hush. The further we went, the less the world looked like mine. And then, rising at the edge of the cliff like something out of an architectural fever dream, was the Blackwell estate. A house of glass and steel, sleek and unyielding, overlooking the restless sea. The ocean wind hit the car as we turned through the wrought iron gates, carrying the salt and chill of another world entirely. When Marcus opened my door, I stepped out and stared. For a moment I forgot how to breathe. The building glittered like an accusation under the late morning sun, transparent walls reflecting the water below, angular lines cutting against the sky. It was stunning. And it was a cage. I could see the ocean in every direction but not a single way out. "Mrs. Price will take you to your suite," Marcus said, his tone clipped. "The ceremony begins at 11. "My suite," I repeated faintly. The word sounded like exile. Mrs. Eleanor Price appeared moments later. Silver hair, kind eyes, posture too perfect to be accidental. She looked like a woman who had spent her life maintaining order in other people's chaos. "Miss Hartley," she said warmly. "Welcome to Blackwell House." Her voice, though gentle, carried authority, the sort that didn't ask for obedience but received it anyway. "Mr. Blackwell is attending to some last-minute business," she continued. "He'll meet you in the garden shortly. May I show you to your rooms?" "Rooms," echoed. "Your wing, dear." The east side of the house. The east wing, as though the house had kingdoms instead of hallways. She led me across a marble floor so polished it mirrored the clouds outside. My heels echoed faintly, swallowed by high ceilings and glass walls that offered no privacy, only reflection. Every corner looked like it had been designed to keep secrets without ever hiding them. "The house has been prepared for you," Eleanor said as we walked. "Wardrobe, toiletries, even books based on your reading preferences. Mr. Blackwell is thorough. Or obsessive." She smiled slightly. "Sometimes the two are the same." When we reached the suite, I almost laughed. It wasn't a room, it was a kingdom. A bedroom with a four-poster bed draped in white silk, a sitting area with pale furniture, a balcony that overlooked the ocean, an uninterrupted horizon that felt more like a warning than a view. "Lunch will be served after the ceremony," Eleanor said. "Do you need anything before then?" "A reason to breathe," I murmured. She pretended not to hear. "Coffee, perhaps." "Black," I said. "No sugar." "Of course." She hesitated at the doorway. "Miss Hartley, Mr. Blackwell isn't an easy man. But he isn't cruel either. He's complicated. I'll take your word for it." Her eyes softened. "Everyone here learned not to ask questions. But we also learned that kindness isn't weakness. Remember that." And then she was gone. I stood alone in the center of that immaculate room and felt utterly displaced. Everything was perfect, too perfect. The flowers were white lilies, my mother's favorite. The art on the walls, Italian Renaissance sketches, were the kind I'd written my thesis on. Even the books on the shelf included my obscure favorites, the ones no one else remembered existed. He'd studied me, not just my debts or my degree me. The realization sent a shiver crawling down my spine. A soft knock at the door pulled me from my thoughts. Eleanor reappeared with a steaming cup of coffee and an envelope. "From Mr. Blackwell," she said. "To be opened after the ceremony." The envelope was heavy, cream-colored, sealed with black wax stamped with a raven. I placed it on the dressing table, untouched. I wasn't sure I could handle another surprise. The ceremony took place in the garden overlooking the sea. Only a handful of witnesses attended. 2 men in suits I didn't know, the officiant and Eleanor. The air smelled faintly of salt and roses. The wind played with the veil I hadn't wanted to wear. When Dante appeared, the world narrowed. Chapter 2: The Pact. The ocean woke me before dawn. Waves struck the cliffs below the glass house, their rhythm heavy and relentless, like a heartbeat I could no longer tell was mine or the sea's. The room smelled faintly of salt and cold marble. Somewhere deep inside the walls, the house hummed, a low mechanical sound that never stopped, as though even silence here had to be engineered. I had slept barely an hour. Every time I drifted, the night replayed itself. The vow, the kiss, the look in Dante's eyes when the officiant said wife. Not triumph. Not tenderness. Something far more complicated. Like he'd just stepped willingly into a cell of his own design. At 6, I gave up on pretending to rest. The closet had already been stocked, of course. Every dress, shoe, and coat arranged by color and fabric, all perfectly my size. I hadn't given anyone those measurements. He must have had them taken from photographs or, God help me, from surveillance. The thought should have chilled me. Instead, I felt something worse, curiosity. When I stepped into the hall, Eleanor was already there, as if she'd been waiting for the sound of my door. "Good morning, Mrs. Blackwell," she said softly, pressing a cup of coffee into my hands before I could refuse. "He's in the study. He'd like a word before breakfast." A word. From Dante, that could mean anything from a contract amendment to an interrogation. The study was on the western side of the house, all dark wood and glass, filled with the scent of ink and rain. Dante sat behind an enormous desk, shirt sleeves rolled, tie abandoned. He looked like a portrait half-painted. Too perfect, too motionless, something a single brushstroke might ruin. He didn't look up when I entered. "You didn't sleep," he said. It wasn't a question. "Neither did you," I replied. He finally raised his eyes. "How would you know?" "Because the house keeps your secrets badly. I heard you pacing." A shadow of amusement crossed his face. "Sharp ears. Occupational hazard of being caged," I said. "You learn to listen." His gaze lingered, assessing. Then he gestured to the chair opposite him. "Sit." I stayed standing. He exhaled through his nose, a sound of patience thinning. "This isn't a negotiation, Olivia. It's a warning." "About what?" He tapped the edge of the newspaper spread before him. The headline was a blur of finance and scandal, but one name leapt out in bold. Bianchi syndicate leader arrested in Milan. "You're connected to them," I said quietly. "Was," he corrected. "I severed ties years ago. Not everyone believes me. Let me guess, they're not fond of severance packages. 2 of my warehouses were attacked last month." He slid a folder toward me. Inside were photographs. Charred metal, bullet holes, a spray of glass like frozen rain. "And now they know about you." My pulse stumbled. "Me? I've never even." "They don't need a reason. A wife is leverage. So that's why you married me," I said slowly. "Protection. A legal shield." "Partly. And because debt makes people loyal." He wore black, of course, an obsidian suit, no tie, white shirt undone at the collar. The kind of effortless power that doesn't need decoration. His eyes found mine immediately, dark and unreadable, and for a fleeting second I thought I saw hesitation there. Then it was gone. The officiant's voice carried through the wind. "Do you, Dante Alexander Blackwell, take this woman?" He answered without pause. "I do." And when it was my turn, I somehow found my voice. "I do," I said, though it sounded like someone else speaking. "Then I pronounce you husband and wife." The kiss was supposed to be ceremonial, quick, mechanical. It wasn't. Dante's hand rose to my jaw, his thumb brushing just below my ear as he bent to meet me. The touch was firm but gentle, deliberate. His lips were cool at first, then warm, lingering just long enough to make the world tilt. It was over in a heartbeat. But something had shifted. I felt it in the tremor of his breath when he stepped back. "Mrs. Blackwell," he said quietly, as though testing the name on his tongue. "Welcome home." After the witnesses drifted away and the papers were signed, he offered his arm. "Walk with me." I hesitated. "Do I have a choice?" "There's always a choice," he said, and I couldn't tell if it was truth or mockery. We walked the stone path that wound through the cliffside garden. Below us, the ocean crashed against rock, relentless and alive. The wind caught strands of my hair, tangling them across my face. Without thinking, he reached out and tucked them behind my ear. The gesture startled us both. He withdrew his hand quickly, eyes hardening. "This arrangement will be easier if we keep expectations clear." Meaning, "This is not a love match. I know. You'll have your independence," he continued. "Your work at the museum, your own wing of the house. You'll attend events with me when required, and the world will believe what it needs to. And behind closed doors." He met my gaze. "Behind closed doors we live our own truths." "Which are?" He looked toward the horizon. "That love is a luxury neither of us can afford." Something inside me twisted, sharp and cold. "You sound very sure." "I learned the cost." His tone softened unexpectedly. "You don't forget the lesson when it's written in blood." Before I could ask what he meant, he turned away. "Eleanor will show you where to dine. I have a call to make." And just like that he was gone. Lunch was served on the terrace, a feast for two eaten by one. Eleanor lingered, watching me pick at my food. "You're trembling," she said gently. "It's just the wind." "No, dear. It's the house. It does that to people at first." "What do you mean?" She poured me more water before answering. "The walls are glass for a reason. Mr. Blackwell likes to see everything. But it also means you're always being seen. You'll get used to it." "Will I?" Her eyes softened. "Everyone does." She left me then, alone with the endless blue and the echo of the vow that had changed everything. I traced the rim of my glass absently, watching the sunlight scatter across the surface. Below, the waves roared against the cliffs, wild, uncontained, everything I suddenly wasn't. I told myself I'd made the right choice, that my father was safe, that survival was enough. But as I looked out at the glittering ocean and the reflection of my own face trapped in the window, I realized the truth. I hadn't entered a marriage. I'd entered a mirror. And mirrors, I was beginning to learn, could break from the inside out. The words hit harder than they should have. I set the folder down carefully. "You think I'd sell you out?" "I think desperation makes saints and traitors of us all." I wanted to slap him. I wanted to prove him wrong. Instead I asked, "So what's the warning?" "That you'll have security details from now on. No solo trips. No unexpected visitors." "Meaning I'm a hostage." "Meaning you're alive." He rose from the desk then, coming around to stand much too close. The air changed, denser, charged. "The men I deal with don't send threats twice," he said quietly. "They send bodies. I won't allow yours to be one of them." I should have pulled back. I didn't. Because in that moment, beneath the ice, there was something like fear in his voice. And fear, not control, made him human. Breakfast was a silent affair in the East Wing dining room. 2 guards lingered near the doorway, pretending not to listen. Their presence made the cutlery sound louder, every clink echoing like a warning bell. Halfway through, Dante's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, jaw tightening, then rose. "Stay inside," he said, and left without another word. Eleanor appeared a minute later, face carefully neutral. "He's gone to the docks," she said. "Business matter. Business or violence. Sometimes they overlap," she said, and disappeared again. I waited until I heard the distant roar of the car engine before slipping out to the terrace. The ocean spread below, mercilessly vast. Freedom and danger looked the same from this height. For the first time, I noticed small black domes embedded along the railings. Cameras, every angle covered. The sense of being watched settled over me like a second skin. Then something moved beyond the outer fence, a flicker of motion near the tree line. A man in a gray jacket, too still, pretending to smoke. Another figure further back, half hidden by the hedge. My stomach turned cold. When I stepped closer to get a better look, one of the guards appeared instantly. "Inside, ma'am." "Who are they?" "Yes. Just kids trespassing." "Liar." He didn't answer, but his hand hovered near his earpiece. Moments later, the men outside melted back into the trees. Dante returned after dusk. His shirt darkened with rain, expression unreadable. Eleanor intercepted him at the foyer with a towel. He ignored it and looked straight at me. "You went outside." Froze. "How did you?" "This house has more eyes than God." He closed the distance between us in 3 strides. "Did anyone speak to you?" "No. But someone was watching." He studied my face for a long moment, then nodded once, decision made. "Pack a small bag." "What? Why?" "We're leaving." Before I could protest, he was already issuing orders into his phone. Guards scattered like shadows. Within 10 minutes, the car waited outside, headlights cutting through the rain. I climbed in without asking where we were going. Some part of me already knew there would be no explanation that made sense outside his logic of control. The drive wound inland, away from the ocean, through backroads that smelled of wet earth and pine. Neither of us spoke. When he finally stopped, it was before a warehouse on the edge of the industrial district, abandoned, judging by the rusted gates. "Stay here," he said. "Not a chance." He looked at me then, really looked, and something shifted. "You want truth, Olivia? Fine. Step inside." The air inside reeked of oil and metal. 2 black SUVs idled near the loading bay. 4 men waited, their suits too crisp, their smiles too polite. Bianchi associates, I guessed, though none of them bore names. Dante's voice changed when he spoke to them. Lower, colder. "You followed my wife." "She was outside," one of the men said. "Public property. She's under my protection. That makes everywhere private." The man laughed softly. "You've gone soft, Blackwell. Marriage makes fools of killers." The word killers landed like a slap. Dante didn't flinch. He stepped closer until the man's smile faltered. "I'm not soft," he said quietly. "Just efficient." Before anyone could blink, Dante's hand moved, swift, precise, and the man's gun clattered to the floor, disarmed before it cleared its holster. The others froze. Dante's voice stayed calm. "If you ever come near her again, I'll erase your entire line from the registry. Am I understood?" They nodded. The one he'd disarmed cradled his wrist, blood trickling from a shallow cut. Dante picked up the gun, emptied the magazine, and handed it back, grip first. "Now leave." They did. When the last car disappeared into the dark, he turned to me. His expression was the same as always, controlled, immaculate, but his hands trembled faintly at his sides. "You didn't have to see that," he said. "I think I did. This is what I am, Olivia. You should understand it before you start imagining fairy tales." "I'm not imagining anything," I whispered. "I'm just trying to decide if you scare me more when you're violent or when you're kind." His jaw tightened. "Fear keeps people alive. And what keeps them human?" He didn't answer. Back at the house, Eleanor met us with dry towels and silence. Dante disappeared into the study again, shutting the door behind him. I stood in the hall dripping rainwater onto marble, feeling the weight of everything I'd seen. He wasn't the monster the world whispered about. Monsters didn't look that haunted after defending someone. But he wasn't innocent either. He was something in between, a man built from both violence and restraint, each holding the other hostage. When I finally went to bed, sleep came quickly, heavy with exhaustion. But even in dreams, I could still hear his voice at the docks, cold and final. She's under my protection. That makes everywhere private. Protection. Possession. In his world they were the same word. Chapter 3. The crack in the armor. The storm came back the next night. Not the kind that rattles windows, the kind that rattles people. I heard it before I saw it. The deep rumble of engines, the distant thud of doors slamming somewhere beyond the cliff road. Then came the metallic echo of voices through the intercom. Clipped, urgent, military. I had learned by now that the house's silence was never natural. It was trained. So when it broke you paid attention. I found Eleanor in the hallway, her face pale under the flickering sconces. "What's happening?" I asked, her lips pressed together. "He told me to keep you upstairs." "He's here." "Don't." But I was already moving. The west corridor smelled of smoke and rain. Footprints smeared the marble, dark with mud and something that looked too red to be dirt. The study door was half open. Beyond it, Dante stood with his back to me, braced against the edge of the desk. His shirt was torn open at the sleeve, blood streaking his forearm, staining the white fabric like ink spreading through water. "Get out," he said without turning. "I'm not one of your guards," I said, stepping inside. "You're bleeding." He didn't look up. "It's nothing." "That's not nothing." I crossed the room before I could think better of it. "What happened?" His jaw flexed. "A message. They wanted to remind me that marriage doesn't erase enemies." I glanced at the wound, deep, angry, still bleeding through the makeshift bandage he'd tied with his tie. "You need stitches." "I need silence." "Tough luck." When I reached for his arm, he caught my wrist midair. The contact was lightning, sudden, fierce, and far too human. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then his grip loosened. "You don't listen." "I do," I said softly. "Just not to orders I disagree with." Something in his expression cracked then, the faintest flicker of surprise. "Eleanor has a first aid kit," I added. "Sit down before you collapse on your $1,000,000 carpet." He almost smiled. "Almost. You're insufferable." "Good. That means I'm still alive." He let me clean the wound. Not because he trusted me but because he was too exhausted to fight. The blood was warm against my fingers. His skin fever-hot. Every breath he took came with that sharp intake of pain he was too proud to hide. I worked silently, aware of the intimacy of it, of being close enough to smell the salt and smoke on him, the faint scent of his cologne edged with rain. When I pressed the gauze to his arm, he hissed between his teeth. "Careful," he said. "Sorry." I met his eyes. "You're not used to people touching you, are you?" His silence was answer enough. I wrapped the bandage, hands trembling slightly. "You could have been killed. That's always been part of the job." "What job is that exactly?" He looked at me for a long moment, then said, "The one that keeps you breathing." I didn't have a reply for that. When it was done, he leaned back in the chair, eyes closed. The storm outside threw white flashes across his face, carving him in light and shadow. He looked younger like that, not the untouchable businessman the world feared, but a man whose ghosts had teeth. I should have left. Instead, I whispered, "Why do you do it?" "Do what?" "Live like this, surrounded by walls and guns. Is it really worth it?" He opened his eyes. "Worth what?" "Your peace. Your soul." He laughed quietly, not cruelly, but like someone who had forgotten what real laughter felt like. "Peace is for people who have the luxury of forgetting. I don't. And me. Do I have that luxury now?" He didn't answer. Instead, his hand lifted, slowly, uncertainly, until his fingers brushed a stray lock of hair from my face. The gesture was small, almost accidental, but it stole the air from the room. "You should stay away from me," he said, voice low. "I'm not safe." "I know," I breathed. "That's why I'm still here." The storm broke over the cliffs then, thunder rolling like a confession too late to take back. He exhaled shakily, as if surrendering something invisible. Then his hand fell away. Later, I found him in the glass corridor overlooking the sea. The rain had turned the windows into mirrors. We stood reflected side by side, strangers wearing each other's ghosts. "I told you once," he said quietly, "that love is a weakness." "I remember." He turned toward me. "But tonight I realized something worse." "What?" "That it's also an addiction." He stepped closer. The space between us shrank until the air itself seemed to tremble. His voice was barely a whisper now. "You should leave before I forget the difference." And yet he didn't move away. The first touch was nothing, a brush of his fingers against mine, accidental, inevitable. The kind of contact that shouldn't mean anything but suddenly meant everything. My pulse stuttered. His eyes darkened. Then the second touch came, deliberate this time. His hand at the back of my neck. His thumb tracing the line of my jaw as if memorizing a sin. I felt my breath catch, my body betray me. He leaned in, slow enough for me to stop him, and I didn't. The kiss was fire. Controlled at first, then consuming. The collision of restraint and desperation. His mouth tasted of wine and rain and something darker, something like grief. When he broke away, he rested his forehead against mine, breathing hard. "This can't happen again," he said. "Then why did it?" He didn't answer. He just turned away, fists clenched, as if he could will the moment out of existence. "Go to your room, Olivia." "No." His eyes flashed, that dangerous mix of fury and fear. "Don't test me." "I'm not testing you," I said quietly. "I'm reminding you that you're human." That stopped him. For a long moment, neither of us moved. Then he said, almost to himself, "That's exactly what terrifies me." I didn't sleep that night either. I stood by the window until the sky began to pale, watching lightning fade into dawn. The house was quiet again, but not the same kind of quiet. This was the silence after impact, when you know something irreversible has shifted, but the pieces haven't landed yet. Downstairs I heard him moving, pacing, always pacing, a man fighting with himself and losing. For the first time, I wondered if I was part of his punishment, or his salvation, maybe both. Chapter 4: The First Touch. The house slept, but I couldn't. Rain had stopped sometime after 3 a.m., leaving the air thick and electric. The sea below whispered instead of roared, as if it too was holding its breath. I sat at the window, knees drawn to my chest, staring at the place where water met sky. Dawn hadn't come yet. The horizon was just a bruise of gray and violet. Somewhere in the west wing a door clicked shut. Footsteps echoed faintly down the marble hall, measured, deliberate, the sound of someone trying not to wake ghosts. I knew that walk. Before I could think better of it, I left my room. He was standing in the glass corridor that overlooked the ocean, the same place we'd almost kissed before the world changed shape. No jacket, shirt sleeves rolled, hair uncharacteristically undone. He looked less like the man who owned empires and more like someone who had forgotten how to rest. "You're awake," he said without turning. "So are you." He nodded once, as though that explained everything. "Storms make me restless. Because of the noise. Because of the silence after." I came to stand beside him. The sea stretched beneath us, black and endless. The reflection in the glass showed two figures framed in ghostlight, a man made of restraint, a woman made of questions. "You should be asleep," he murmured. "I could say the same." He glanced at me, mouth curving faintly. "Touché." For a while we said nothing. The quiet wasn't comfortable exactly, but it wasn't cruel either. It felt like the space between heartbeats. Fragile, necessary. Finally I asked, "Who was she?" He didn't pretend not to understand. Isabel. The name hung there, soft and sharp. She died because of me, he said simply. That's the short version. And the long one. He exhaled, fog ghosting the glass. She believed she could save me from the men I worked for. Thought love was enough to buy absolution. She was wrong. What happened? She tried to trade information to the police. They found out before I did. His voice stayed level, but his hands clenched. I wasn't there when it happened. I was negotiating a deal that was supposed to protect her. I swallowed. And that's why you built all this. This. He gestured toward the house. The glass, the guards, the isolation. No. I built this because I couldn't build a coffin big enough for guilt. The honesty cut deeper than any confession of crime could have. You think walls can keep it out? I asked quietly. I think walls keep other people safe from it. I turned to face him. You mean they keep you safe from people? His eyes flicked to mine, dark and searching. Maybe both. Lightning flickered far out over the sea. In that brief flash of light, I saw every contradiction written on him. Violence and tenderness, arrogance and ruin. You can't keep punishing yourself forever, I said. I can try. Then let me try something else. Before he could ask what, I reached for his hand. He went very still. For a heartbeat, I thought he'd pull away. Instead, his fingers tightened around mine. Hesitant, disbelieving, as if remembering how to hold another human being. His skin was warm, pulse steady beneath the surface, alive in a way the rest of him hadn't been in years. You don't have to be alone in it, I whispered. Alone is safer. Safe isn't living. He looked at me then, really looked, and something in his gaze softened, the way glass softens just before it shatters. We stood like that for a long time. Two silhouettes reflected against the ocean, our joined hands the only movement in the stillness. The storm light flickered again, illuminating the faint scar on his wrist, the one that hadn't been there when we met. I traced it gently with my thumb. He didn't flinch. A reminder. Of what? That surviving isn't the same as being forgiven. I wanted to tell him forgiveness wasn't something you earned. It was something you allowed. But words felt too small. So instead, I lifted his hand and pressed it lightly to my heart. Do you feel that? Yes. He nodded once. It means you're still here. For a moment, the world narrowed to that single heartbeat. His palm against my chest, the faint tremor of his breath, the weight of everything unspoken pressing between us. Then slowly he exhaled. I don't deserve this, he said. Probably not, I answered. But neither did I, and you gave it anyway. Something like a laugh, soft, broken, escaped him. You think this is giving. I think it's surrender, I said. He closed his eyes. You make surrender sound holy. Maybe it is. When he opened his eyes again, the first light of morning had begun to bleed into the sky. The ocean turned from black to steel to pale blue, and the house filled with its reflection. He let go of my hand only to touch my cheek, thumb brushing the corner of my mouth, a gesture so careful it hurt. Olivia, he said quietly, if I were a better man I'd send you away. Maybe I don't want a better man. He shook his head. You don't know what you're saying. I know exactly what I'm saying. You keep building walls, Dante. Let me be a window. The metaphor made him smile, barely. A window can break. So can people. His hand dropped to his side. That's what I'm afraid of. We stayed until the sun broke fully over the horizon, turning the water to molten gold. For once, the house didn't feel like a cage. It felt like a pause, a moment carved out of consequence. When he finally spoke again, his voice was softer. You should rest. Today will bring questions we're not ready to answer. From whom? Everyone, he said. The world loves to watch the powerful fall in love. It's easier to forgive their sins if they bleed first. I smiled faintly. Then let's not give them the show. He looked at me for a long, unreadable moment, then stepped closer and pressed his lips to my forehead. Not a lover's kiss, but a benediction. It lasted a second. Changed everything. Later, when he'd gone back to the study and the house resumed its endless hum, I stood alone in the corridor where dawn still touched the glass. My reflection looked different somehow, softer at the edges like light seen through tears. Maybe nothing had really changed. He was still a man haunted by ghosts, and I was still the woman bound by a contract. But for that single hour before sunrise, we had been something else. Two broken things remembering what wholeness felt like. And sometimes that's all salvation is. A single touch that doesn't take, a silence that finally answers. Chapter 5. The Return of the Past. For 3 days, the house pretended to be at peace. Sunlight spilled over the cliffs every morning, soft and gold, warming the glass walls that had once felt like bars. The sea was calm, the wind mild. Even the gulls seemed gentler, their cries drifting lazily over the horizon. In another life I might have believed it. In this one, I'd learned that silence was only the sound of danger catching its breath. Eleanor had started bringing breakfast to the terrace. Coffee, fruit, sometimes a plate of lemon scones she swore helped calm the nerves. She talked more lately, as if the stillness unnerved her too. "You're settling in," she said that morning, setting down the tray. "The house feels different when you're here. Lighter." I smiled faintly. Maybe it's remembering how to breathe. She gave me a look, the kind that carried both affection and warning. "Just be careful, dear. Houses like this don't forget." Before I could ask what she meant, her phone buzzed. She checked the screen, her expression shuddering instantly. "Excuse me, Mrs. Blackwell. I'll just be a moment." And then she was gone, leaving the faint smell of bergamot tea in her wake. The waves below were slow, deliberate. I tried to sketch them, something I'd begun doing again, a way to remind myself that my hands still belonged to me. The pencil's soft scratching filled the quiet. For a while I forgot where I was, until the click of a door echoed behind me. Turned. Dante stood in the doorway of the terrace, phone pressed to his ear. His face was unreadable, but the tension in his shoulders told a story the calm tone of his voice tried to deny. "Yes," he said. "I'll handle it. Personally." Then. "No, not here. Never here." He noticed me only when he ended the call. For a moment neither of us spoke. Then he crossed the space between us, the sea glinting like metal behind him. "Is something wrong?" "Yes." He hesitated. "Routine business. You said that the night you came home bleeding." His jaw flexed just once. "This is different." "Different how?" He looked at the sketchbook on my lap. The pencil sketch of waves caught mid-motion. "You're talented," he said instead. "Don't stop drawing." "Dante." "Please," he said, and there was something raw in the word that made me obey, even without understanding why. That afternoon, small things began to change. The house staff moved with a quiet urgency I hadn't seen before. The security guards doubled their patrols. A new car arrived in the lower driveway. Armored, black, anonymous. Eleanor avoided my eyes. When I asked her what was happening, she smiled too quickly. "Nothing, dear. Mr. Blackwell is just being careful." Careful. The word again. The word that always came before danger. That evening, as I passed the foyer, I noticed a thin crack running through one of the glass panels near the door. It caught the light like a vein of lightning frozen mid-strike. By the time I mentioned it to Eleanor, the crack was gone, replaced overnight, no evidence it had ever existed. "Glass can warp under pressure," she said, her tone too even. "Just the wind." But the wind didn't leave hairline fractures shaped like impact. On the fourth night, an envelope appeared beneath my bedroom door. No handwriting. No seal. Inside, a single line typed on plain paper. "He can't protect you from what's already inside." My throat went dry. I crossed the hall and found Eleanor polishing the stair rail, as if she'd been waiting for me. When I handed her the note, she read it once, then again, her face paling slightly. "Where did you get this?" "It was under my door." She folded it, slid it into her pocket, and said nothing. "Eleanor," I pressed. "What does it mean?" She met my eyes then, and I saw something I hadn't seen before: pity. "It means someone wants you frightened, dear. And they've succeeded." When I turned to leave, she caught my hand. "Don't show him the note." "Why not?" "Because men like Dante don't react to fear. They eliminate it. And I'm not sure who he'd eliminate first." The next morning, Dante was already gone. His side of the bed was untouched, but the faint smell of smoke lingered, and on the desk by the window lay a stack of papers. Contracts, maps, a single photo turned face down. I shouldn't have looked. I did. It was a surveillance photo. Grainy, distant, but unmistakable. My father outside his art gallery, talking to a man in a gray jacket. The same kind of jacket I'd seen near the trees that day. A tremor ran through me. I grabbed my phone and called him. Rang once. Then someone picked up. "Dad!" Static. A muffled sound. Then a voice that wasn't his. "Mrs. Blackwell. Tell your husband we're closer than he thinks." The line went dead. By the time Dante returned that night, I was waiting in his study. He stopped when he saw my face. "What happened? You tell me." I slid the photo across his desk. "Where did this come from?" His eyes flicked to it once, then back to me. "That's not yours to worry about. Someone called me." His entire body stilled. "Who?" "I don't know. But they had him. My father." The silence between us tightened like wire. Finally he said, "He's alive." "How do you know?" "Because if he weren't, they wouldn't have called you." I swallowed hard. "You knew this was coming." "I suspected. And you didn't tell me. If I'd told you, you would have run straight into the trap they built for you." He stepped closer, hands on the desk, voice low and dangerous. "You think you understand the rules of this world. Don't. These people don't trade in truth, Olivia. They trade in pain." "Then what are you trading in?" I whispered. "Control. Or guilt?" The question landed like a blow. For a moment he said nothing. Then, very quietly, "Both." Later, when the house had gone still, I stood by the window, staring into the dark. The ocean looked different now. Blacker, endless, no longer comforting. The reflection in the glass wasn't my face anymore. It was the echo of fear. That's when I saw it, across the cliffs on the far side of the bay. Light. Blinking once, twice, 3 times. Then again. I thought it was nothing until I realized the rhythm wasn't random. It was deliberate. Patterned. Signal. My breath fogged the glass. From the far end of the corridor, a shadow moved. Dante, watching the same light from his study, expression carved in stone. He didn't move to close the curtains. He just stood there, jaw set, eyes fixed on the horizon like a man reading his own obituary. The next morning he was gone before sunrise. Eleanor found me at breakfast, her voice steady but her hands trembling as she poured the coffee. "He's gone to make arrangements," she said. "What arrangements?" "The kind that end things." Her eyes met mine. "Mrs. Blackwell, whatever's coming next, it started a long time ago. Before you. Before this house." She hesitated, then added quietly, "Sometimes love doesn't save people. It only delays their ruin." I looked out at the glass walls, the ocean beyond, and the reflection of my own uncertain face. The light across the cliffs was gone now, but its afterimage still pulsed behind my eyes. Peace, I realized, had never been ours. It had only borrowed time, and time had just come to collect. Chapter 6. The Lie That Saves. Morning came gray and heavy, the kind of light that turns glass into mirrors and reflections into ghosts. The sea was flat, colorless. Even the gulls had gone silent. It felt as if the house itself knew what he was about to do. Dante was different that day. Not colder, too calm, too deliberate. He moved through rooms like a man rehearsing a farewell. When he passed me in the corridor, he touched my shoulder lightly, almost absently, as though committing the shape of it to memory. "Eleanor will bring lunch to your rooms," he said. "You're not eating." Later. He smiled, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. I have to settle a few accounts. The phrase sounded harmless. It wasn't. After he left, the house felt wrong. Guards murmured in the hallways, radios whispering words I couldn't catch. Eleanor busied herself with silverware that didn't need polishing. When I asked where Dante had gone, she pretended not to hear. Around noon she appeared at my door with a tray of untouched food and a brittle smile. "Eat something, dear." "Tell me the truth," I said. Her hand stilled on the tray. "The truth seldom comforts anyone in this house." "Then comfort me with honesty." She looked at me for a long moment, then set the tray down. "He's arranging an exchange." My heart stumbled. "For my father." She nodded once. I sat back against the chair, dizzy with disbelief. "He said the syndicate wouldn't." "Men like Mr. Blackwell don't bargain because they trust," she interrupted gently. "They bargain because they've run out of choices." I found him in the study that evening, standing before the window where the sea caught the last of the light. He didn't turn when I entered. Maybe he already knew I'd come. "Eleanor told me," I said. Silence. "You're trading yourself for him." Still nothing. Only the faint movement of his hands as he folded a sheet of paper. Precise, ritualistic. "Say it," I demanded. He finally turned. The fading sun carved his face into halves, light and shadow. "If I do this, they'll release him. It ends the debt. It ends all of it." "It ends you," I whispered. He smiled faintly. "That's negotiable. Don't make it sound noble. It's suicide." "It's arithmetic," he said softly. "One life for another." I crossed the room, anger breaking through fear. "And what about our life? Or does that not factor into your equation?" Something flickered in his expression. Grief, maybe, or longing. "There was never supposed to be an hour, Olivia. You know that." "But there is," I said. "You made it exist." He looked away. "That was my first mistake." "No," I stepped closer, voice trembling. "Your first mistake was believing you can erase love by sacrificing yourself. Doesn't work that way. It only multiplies the ghosts." That made him flinch. A small, involuntary thing, but real. He said nothing. On his desk lay a letter, folded and sealed in black wax. My name was written across it in his handwriting. Sharp, disciplined, final. "What's this?" "Insurance," he said. "Against what?" "Against me not coming back." I stared at the letter, at the quiet defeat pressed into its edges. "Don't give me this. Olivia. Don't you dare give me this." For a second I thought I saw him break. His hand twitched toward mine, then stopped, halfway between reach and retreat. "I have to go," he said. "When?" "Soon." "How soon?" He didn't answer. I followed him into the corridor. "At least let me come." "No." "Then take someone you trust." "I trust no one." "Then you'll die." He stopped, turned. The look he gave me was both warning and apology. "If that's the price, I'll pay it quietly. Don't you understand?" My voice cracked. "You're not saving me by dying. You're just teaching me how to live without you." He took a slow breath, as if weighing the words, then said the gentlest thing he'd ever said to me. "That's exactly what I want." After he left, the house resumed its hum. Eleanor found me sitting on the stairs hours later, the letter unopened in my lap. "He asked me to give you something," she said, holding out a small velvet box. Inside lay the emerald ring, the one he'd given me on our wedding day. The stone glimmered darkly in the lamplight. "He said it shouldn't go with him," Eleanor murmured. "Said you'd know what it meant." I did. Meant goodbye. Night fell slowly, stretching the hours thin. I couldn't sit still. Every room echoed with ghosts of conversation. I wandered through the corridors, tracing my fingers along cold glass until I found myself back in the glass hallway overlooking the sea. The horizon was black, moonless. Somewhere out there, a single boat's light moved through the waves. Small, distant, determined. He was on it, going where no promise could follow. Eleanor's footsteps sounded behind me. "If you love him," she said quietly, "let him do what he thinks is right. And if what he thinks is right kills him, then you'll have loved him as he was. That's more mercy than most men ever get." Her hand rested on my shoulder for a moment, then she walked away, leaving me with the sea and the hum of the glass around us. I returned to the study, to the letter still waiting. I told myself I wouldn't open it, that it was meant for after. But love is curious. It wants truth even when truth burns. Broke the seal. "Olivia, if you're reading this, I've done what I promised. The world will call it a debt repaid. You'll call it betrayal. Both will be true. You once asked me what keeps a man human. The answer is memory. And you are mine. Whatever happens after tonight, remember that you were never collateral. You were the only part of the equation that didn't feel like a lie. D." The handwriting blurred as tears hit the page. I folded the letter carefully, pressed it to my chest, and listened to the sea. The tide was rising fast, whispering against the cliffs like a warning. He thought I would stay here. He should have known better. By midnight I was already packing. Not much. Just a coat, my sketchbook, and the ring he'd left behind. Outside, the wind had picked up again. The same car that had once brought me here waited in the garage, keys still in the ignition. Eleanor's voice echoed softly from the doorway. "If you go after him, you can't come back." "I never belonged here anyway," I said. She nodded, eyes shining. "Then may the sea show mercy." As I drove down the cliff road, the sky broke open above me. Rain swept across the windshield, erasing the world in sheets of silver. Each mile felt like a heartbeat counting backward to zero. In the distance, lightning flashed over the bay, the same place I'd seen the signal days ago. And in that white glare, just for a second, I thought I saw the outline of a boat cutting through the water toward the storm. Back in the house, the glass walls trembled under the wind, the rooms echoing with their own emptiness. Eleanor stood alone in the doorway of the corridor where dawn would soon return. She looked toward the sea and whispered to no one, "Let this be the lie that saves them both." But the waves didn't answer. They never did. Chapter 7: Blood for Debt. The night smelled of iron and salt. Rain traced thin silver lines down the windshield as I drove along the coastal road, headlights cutting through fog that looked almost alive. The directions Dante's guard had once whispered to another man echoed in my memory. Pier 9. After midnight. That's where he would be. That's where I would find him. The port was almost deserted. Old warehouses crouched along the docks like sleeping beasts, their windows black, their walls bleeding rust. Somewhere out on the water, chains clinked softly against metal. I parked behind a stack of cargo containers and stepped out into the rain. The wind bit at my face, sharp and wet. There were voices inside the largest warehouse. Low, measured, male. The kind of calm that only people used to violence could have. I moved closer, keeping to the shadows. Through a broken panel, I saw them. 6 men in dark coats, a single hanging bulb swaying above them. The floor glistened with rain that had seeped through cracks in the roof. And in the middle of it all, Dante. He stood unarmed. Every line of his body carved in quiet defiance. Opposite him was a man I recognized from the grainy photo. Anton Bianchi. Older now, but his smile was the same. Thin, deliberate venom disguised as charm. "You always did overestimate your worth, Blackwell," Bianchi said, his voice smooth as oil. "You wouldn't be here if I had none," Dante replied. "You think trading yourself buys her safety." Bianchi tilted his head. "You know how many times I've heard that line. I'm not here for lines." Bianchi gestured, and one of his men shoved another figure forward. My father. His hands were tied, his face pale but alive. Relief and dread collided in my chest so violently I almost made a sound. Dante's jaw tightened. "Let him go." Bianchi smiled. "After." A long pause stretched between them. Rain dripped steadily from the ceiling, each drop like the tick of an invisible clock. Then Bianchi said, "Tell me something. Was she worth it? The nurse who thought she could heal a man like you." Dante didn't move. She reminded me I was still human. That was enough. Bianchi's smile faded. "Pity. Humanity doesn't last long in our world." He nodded once. The man behind him raised his gun. I didn't think. I moved. My scream broke the stillness as I stepped into the light. "Stop!" Every head turned. Dante's eyes found mine. Shock, fury, fear all at once. "Olivia," he said, voice barely audible. "No." Bianchi laughed softly. "Ah, the ghost herself." "She has nothing to do with this," Dante said. "Oh, but she has everything to do with this," Bianchi mused. "You built your empire on silence, and she made you speak. That's quite a crime." "Let him go," I said, voice shaking but steady. "Take me instead." Bianchi arched an eyebrow. "How romantic." Dante stepped forward, placing himself between us. "This ends with me. No one else." "Very well," Bianchi said. He lowered his hand, signaling the man with the gun. "End it." The shot rang out before I could scream. Dante staggered back a step, surprise flickering across his face. Not pain, not yet, just shock at the inevitability of it. Then the blood bloomed across his shirt, dark and spreading fast. He fell to one knee. I ran to him, slipping on the wet concrete, catching his shoulders before he hit the ground. His breath came shallow, broken. The rain mixed with red, washing it down into cracks between the tiles. Bianchi's voice drifted somewhere above us. "You see, Mrs. Blackwell, love is bad for business." The world narrowed to the sound of Dante's breathing. I pressed my hands to the wound. "Stay with me." He looked at me, and even bleeding out on a warehouse floor, he managed a smile. Small, tired, heartbreakingly gentle. "Olivia," he whispered, "you shouldn't be here. I'm not leaving you. You were supposed to be safe. So were you." He coughed, crimson touching his lips. "There's a car outside. Take him." He meant my father. "Drive east. Don't look back. I won't go without you." He lifted a shaking hand, fingers brushing my cheek. His skin was already cold. "You already have," he murmured. "You just haven't noticed yet." Footsteps approached. Bianchi's men closing in. One of them raised his weapon again, but Bianchi stopped him with a gesture. "Let them say goodbye. It's more poetic this way." Dante's eyes found mine again. There was something fierce still burning there. Not fear but purpose. He forced out a whisper. "Listen. There's a phone in my pocket. Call the number under Eleanor. She'll know what to do." "Stop talking," I begged. "Can't," he said. "Still too much left to protect." Another cough. His breath hitched. "Do you remember what I said? About love being an addiction?" I nodded through tears. He smiled faintly. "You were the cure." And then his hand slipped from mine. The gunfire outside started suddenly. Distant shouts, chaos breaking like thunder. Someone, maybe his men, maybe the police, was closing in. Bianchi cursed and barked orders. In the confusion, I clung to Dante, refusing to let them pull me away. Sirens rose over the rain. Someone shouted my name, my father, his voice breaking. But I barely heard him. Dante's body was heavy now. His heartbeat fading beneath my hands. The blood kept coming, too much, unstoppable. I whispered his name over and over, as if saying it might anchor him to the world. "Dante, please stay." No answer. Only rain. Only sirens. Only silence. When they pulled me outside, dawn was breaking over the water. The sky was the color of bruised gold, the kind that comes after a storm but before light truly returns. My father tried to speak, but I couldn't hear him. I turned once, just once, toward the open doors of the warehouse where they were covering Dante's body with a black sheet. For a moment, I thought I saw him standing again. Tall, composed, the man who had once promised me safety he could never keep. Then the image dissolved in the rain. Later, the police called it an exchange gone wrong. The papers called it a gang retaliation. None of them called it what it truly was. Love paying its last debt. They never do. That night, back at Blackwell House, I found the glass corridor empty and silent. The sea below was calm again, the waves gentle, deceitful. On the desk in his study, beneath a scattered pile of documents, I found a single piece of paper, unfinished, written in his hand. To love her was to defy logic. To save her was to destroy it. I chose destruction. The ink had smudged, as if he'd stopped writing mid-thought. I folded it carefully, placed it beside his letter from before, and stood at the window until dawn. Somewhere out there, the tide carried away the last traces of him. But in the faint reflection of the glass, I saw us both, the living and the ghosts side by side. Chapter 8. The Ocean Between US. 3 months passed before the sea stopped sounding like a wound. I moved back to the cottage I'd once rented near St. Mary's, the same one I'd left behind the night everything began. The hospital had offered to rehire me part-time at first, to ease back in. They didn't ask about the headlines. They just handed me scrubs and silence. I was grateful for both. The days unfolded quietly. I walked to the clinic, worked, returned home, boiled water for tea. Routine became a kind of mercy. Small, predictable, alive. My father came to visit one Sunday, still weak from the ordeal. He brought flowers he couldn't name and a box of pastries from the corner bakery. "You look better," he said, studying me. "I'm trying." That's enough. We didn't speak of Dante. The name hovered between us, unsaid but understood. When he left, I stood at the door watching his car disappear down the road. And for the first time since the warehouse, I didn't feel anger. Only gratitude that someone had survived. I spent evenings by the window, sketching the horizon. The drawings had changed. Less shadow, more light, though the light was pale and hesitant. Sometimes, without meaning to, I'd still draw him. A silhouette near the glass, a figure facing the sea. Every time I told myself it was just composition. Every time my hands trembled anyway. One morning a letter arrived without a return address. Inside was a single photograph. The Blackwell estate seen from the cliffs, the windows gleaming like mirrors beneath the rising sun. On the back, in Eleanor's handwriting, were 5 words. "He kept his promise, dear." I didn't know what she meant. Perhaps the accounts were settled, the debts erased. Or perhaps she meant the other promise, the one he never said aloud. "You'll live." That night I walked to the water. The tide was coming in, calm and slow, foam curling around the rocks. The wind tasted of salt and rain. I stood barefoot at the edge until the hem of my dress was soaked, listening. Somewhere beneath the waves, I could almost hear his voice. Not words, not even memory, just the rhythm of breath that used to fill the space between sentences. People say grief is a storm you endure until it passes. They're wrong. Grief becomes the air itself. You simply learn how to breathe differently. When the wind picked up, I opened his last letter again. The paper had worn soft from being unfolded too many times. The ink faint where tears had fallen. "Whatever happens after tonight, remember that you were never collateral. You were the only part of the equation that didn't feel like a lie." I traced the words with my thumb, the way I used to trace the line of his jaw. For the first time I smiled, not because it hurt less but because it finally hurt in a way I could bear. Spring came early that year. The cottage garden bloomed wild. Lavender, rosemary, small yellow daisies that seemed to grow just for the stubbornness of it. I planted them because he once said he liked the smell of salt and herbs mixed in the wind. Now the scent filled the rooms, quiet and clean. I started sketching again for the clinic's children's ward. Bright colors this time, nothing tragic, just joy disguised as ink. One of the nurses asked who the man in the margins was. "A friend," I said. It was the truest word I had. Some evenings, when the sky turned the color of glass before dusk, I'd drive back toward the coast road. The ruins of the old warehouse were still there, cordoned off, the sea reclaiming what men had broken. I'd park by the cliffs and sit until the first stars appeared, watching the tide pull light into itself. I never cried anymore. The tears had turned into something quieter, a steady warmth in the chest whenever I thought of him. Maybe that was what love became when it survived its own ending. Not absence, but echo. Not pain, but pulse. On the 100th day after he died, I went down to the shore again. I carried the emerald ring in my palm, the one he said shouldn't go with him. The stone caught the light, deep green like seawater in sunlight. I knelt at the edge and let the tide reach for me. "Thank you," I whispered, "for the lie that saved me." Then I opened my hand. The ring slipped from my fingers, vanishing into the water with barely a ripple. The sea closed over it as though it had been waiting. When I stood, the wind shifted. For a heartbeat, I thought I felt his hand at my back, not to hold me, just to steady me. Then it was gone, replaced by the sound of waves colliding softly against rock. I turned toward the horizon. The sun was breaking through the clouds, light spilling across the ocean like forgiveness. Somewhere far below, the tide carried an emerald through its endless motion, circling the world he'd left behind. I smiled, small, real, the kind that comes only after ruin. The sea answered in its own language, a whisper that could have been anything or everything. "I'm still here." Epilogue. The last letter. The sea looks different when you stop fighting it. It's been 3 years since the night at the pier, and I've learned that grief isn't a storm to outlast. It's a tide that learns your rhythm. It retreats. It returns. It never stops singing. I live now in a small house on the northern coast, far from the city and its headlines. The walls are whitewashed, the windows always open. Salt air drifts through the curtains every morning, and at night the sound of waves becomes my lullaby. I tell myself I chose this place for the light. But really, I chose it because it faces the same horizon he used to watch. People don't talk about him anymore. The world has a way of forgetting men who refuse to be defined by it. His companies were dissolved. His estate sold to someone whose name I never bothered to learn. In the newspapers, he's a footnote, a cautionary tale about power and consequence. But I know the truth. Dante Blackwell didn't die for power. He died for love. And though no one writes about love in crime reports, it lingers in the spaces between sentences, invisible but undeniable. Every year on the same day, I return to the cliffs. I bring coffee. His, black and unsweetened, and a notebook. The pages are filled with letters I never sent. I write them anyway. Some are angry. Some are grateful. Most are simply quiet. Today, as I sit on the rock where the sea spray reaches just high enough to kiss the paper, I start a new one. Only. You once told me that love was an addiction, that it burned too bright to last. You were wrong. Love isn't the flame. It's the warmth that stays after the fire dies. You gave me a life back. Not the one you imagined, not the one I thought I wanted, but one where I wake up each morning and choose to stay. That's more than I ever thought possible. The hospital keeps me busy. I teach now, younger nurses, most of them just beginning, all of them full of the same faith I used to have. I tell them that healing isn't about saving people from pain. It's about staying when pain arrives. Maybe that's what you were trying to teach me all along. Some nights, I still dream of the house. The sound of the glass corridor when the wind moves through it. The way the sea looked reflected in your eyes. I don't wake up crying anymore. I wake up remembering. And memory, I've learned, is its own kind of mercy. Wherever you are, if anywhere is what comes next, I hope it's quiet. I hope the sea there is gentle. There's always The letter flutters in the wind as I sign it, and for a second I almost think I hear him laugh. That low, quiet sound that once made me believe the world could still be soft. I fold the page carefully and slip it into a glass bottle I keep just for this. The glass is clear, thick, weighty in my hand. When the next wave climbs the rocks, I let it go. It floats for a moment, spinning, before the current catches it and carries it out toward the horizon. That's the closest thing to faith I have left, believing that words like love find their way back somehow. As I walk back along the cliff path, the wind picks up. The sun is setting now, painting the sea in bruised gold and violet, the same colors I once saw bleeding through the windows of his house. A boy from the nearby village waves from the shore. He helps me tend the garden sometimes. Going home, Miss Olivia, he calls. Yes, I say. Home. The word no longer feels like loss. At the cottage, the evening light filters through the windows, catching on something in the corner of the room. The small wooden box I brought from Blackwell House before it was sold. Inside are a few keepsakes. The cufflink he left on my nightstand. A pressed sprig of rosemary from the garden he never saw bloom. And the photo Eleanor once sent. The house caught at sunrise, windows blazing like fire. The glass in the picture cracked years ago. A hairline fracture across his reflection. I used to think it ruined the image. Now I see it differently. The light only scattered because it was trying to reach more places at once. Later, when the lamps are off and the sea hums softly against the cliffs, I sit at my desk and open my sketchbook one last time. I draw him as I remember him. Not the businessman, not the ghost, but the man in the glass corridor at dawn, looking at me like I was the first thing he'd ever chosen for himself. The lines come easily now. My hand no longer shakes. When I'm done, I write a single caption beneath it. He loved her enough to let her live. Outside, the moon has risen. The tide glows faintly under its light, silver and endless. I step outside, the night air cool against my skin. Somewhere far out on the horizon, a faint green glint catches the light. A reflection, a trick, maybe the emerald ring rolling through the depths. Smile. He's still here. Just not in the way he once was. And maybe that's what forever really means. Not staying but never fully leaving. The wind moves through the grass. The sea murmurs against the rocks. And in the space between waves, I whisper into the dark. Not a prayer, not a goodbye. Just a promise. I'll live well, Dante. That will be my love letter back to you. End.